Computer. Yay, the voice told me it's recording. Okay, so once again, I have the pleasure of speaking with my thesis supervisor, Dr. Sandra Monteiro. One of the things that I've asked to explore with you is the term clinical reasoning and synonyms of diagnostic reasoning and clinical decision making. The main aim is to try to figure out utilizing and leveraging your expertise or your knowledge accumulated across time, whether or not these are actually proper constructs. Because my view currently is that they're not, and I'll try to define the term construct, something that is identifiably itself and not other things, or not comprised of other things. It's something that I could call more or less bedrock. This is a thing that I can observe. If I can observe it, then I can probably interface with it. I don't want to say manipulate it or intervene, but sort of, right? So to work with it, especially in education settings, to try to work with it so that people can get better at an identifiable, observable skill. So to start with, do you have a general take on the terms clinical reasoning, clinical decision making, diagnostic reasoning, as to whether or not those are constructs in the way that I've attempted to define?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And thank you for inviting me back, Sam. It's always fun to talk to you.
Yes.
And you know this, but for your audience, my scholarly training, my background, my PhD is in cognitive psychology. So every answer I give draws on that background and my understanding of how the brain processes information, how we learn from infancy up to childhood, and how we develop our own understanding of constructs in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so concept formation, which in my mind is a synonym for construct.
Okay.
But I mean, I guess we can debate that. I'd actually have to look it up with a dictionary. Is taught to us like concept formation. We are guided to form concepts as children, like mom and dad and dog and cat. And then, but our brain has evolved, thankfully, to also detect constructs in our
Mm-hmm.
environment.
Mm-hmm.
So things that repeat together end up being uh, have associations in our head, and they're basically a concept in the way that they function.
Mm-hmm.
So you know the concept now. Most people listening to this should know the concept of going to a party, right?
Okay.
To me, that's a concept of how you're supposed to behave. You might want to bring a gift for the host, and there's like social norms and all, like it's a complex concept,
Mm-hmm.
but it's one you've learned by attending parties
Mm-hmm.
over time. And if you were invited to a party and you showed up and the scene looked like a classroom, I think you'd be really, really confused
Okay.
and you'd be not set up to behave appropriately in that setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why did they call this a party? That's not what a party looks like. And that's a pretty ridiculous analogy, but I like to use sort of simple
Yep.
words
Yep.
to point out how ridiculous these things are. I feel like when we go into healthcare, those analogies don't seem as, or those when people mash those things up and they might like confuse concepts or misrepresent them. It's not as ridiculous in
Mm-hmm.
healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think when you say a construct where it's a standalone thing, as a cognitive psychologist, I appreciate that everything we understand to make up our world, we made up, right? We
Mm-hmm.
used our language to define the
Yep.
boundaries of what a table is.
Mm-hmm.
But, there's this like cute little psychology thing where it's like, okay, define a table for me. And you can very quickly um, undo someone's confidence that they know what a table is, right?
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like it's a flat surface with four legs, and you
Mm-hmm.
can point to any number of things that
Mm-hmm.
has a flat surface and four legs, like a
Yep.
chair. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, okay, fine. It doesn't have a back to it, right? And then you
Mm-hmm.
just keep going, and it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, here's a
Mm-hmm.
stool, a bar stool. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but that's
Yep.
not a table. So I'm getting off course a little bit. Let me bring myself
It's
back.
okay.
Um, going back to what I was taught in psychology and what I appreciated only after coming into the applied world of health professions education is that psychologists treat the concept of reasoning, human reasoning, as a distinct topic such that it deserves its own chapter in a psychology textbook.
Mm-hmm.
And then problem solving
Mm-hmm.
often gets its own chapter as well.
Okay.
Decision making and problem solving often go together.
Mm-hmm.
But learning, knowledge, and memory are a separate section in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that distinction is generated by the different psychologists and the culture that contributed
Sure.
to the research, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
kind of put it together. And if you ever are brave enough to read a history of psychology textbook,
Oh,
you'll see that there's, and I don't recommend it necessarily. So I guess you just have to trust me that
I
each
will.
of those chapters starts with the origin of, a model of problem solving and some
Okay.
real world concern way, way back hundreds of years ago or so. And here we are now in 2026. There's going to be so many studies that can be cited that define problem solving and
Mm-hmm.
that outline how humans solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're really critical of those, of the evidence base behind that, you'll see that the way they studied those concepts, how humans problem solve, how humans learn, how humans reason, they use very different paradigms. They
Mm-hmm.
set up tasks very differently.
Okay.
And the sort of like a priori assumptions of how the study is designed are different. And so that's a lot for like just regular people to kind of appreciate unless they've taken on that work of understanding the
Yep.
history of psychology.
Yep.
So maybe I can propose an answer to your question, which is that to me, the simplest way to define reasoning or clinical reasoning specifically is as a product. To
Mm-hmm.
me, the most straightforward way to think of clinical reasoning is it's an outcome, it's a product of how your brain processes the knowledge, experiences, your memory, how your brain
Mm-hmm.
processes the memories you have in relation to the input or the situation you're in right now. So let's say
Mm-hmm.
it's a patient telling you what's bothering them, that processed with the memories you already have, which include stuff you read in a book, stuff you've experienced yourself,
Mm-hmm.
experiences you've had with other patients that said similar things.
Yeah.
And then you get an output.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've noticed in the way that the clinical reasoning literature is written is that it's often from this outsider's novice perspective of
Mm-hmm.
watching an expert reason clinically,
Mm-hmm.
that there's some awe in how quickly the expert gets to the solution. And there's also some sense of a formulaic logical approach behind that because the novice asks the expert, how did you do that? And the truth is, they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They can't say, well, the answer came to me as soon as the person walked in the room. And it wasn't until I asked a few, clarifying questions
Mm-hmm.
that I could confirm. So they often generate a post hoc logical
Yes.
explanation
Yep.
of how they came to that determination. But the timeline wasn't in that chronology, like the steps that they might explain to the novice
Mm-hmm.
didn't actually happen in that linear way.
Mm-hmm.
And so if what gets overlooked is there's a whole contribution to the clinical reasoning literature that demonstrates that for experts, it is the case that they start with the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Often when often when the patient walks in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and then they kind of generate data to
Mm-hmm.
confirm or deny and
Okay.
direct what happens next.
Yep.
And so I don't know if that actually answers your question.
I think it does because if I'm to summarize, basically, clinical reasoning is best considered the outcome of what the clinician does. Yeah, like so if you look at the product or if you look at the output, whatever it might be, it indicates that a process happened. the ability to identify that process is probably difficult. It probably includes a lot of stuff that the person can't explicate. So it is what clinicians do, but it is not linear. One of the things that I've said in previous conversations that I've had with you across time is that the expert looks fast, but they may look like it's the term intuition. You've written on this before. Clinical intuition may better be described, and this isn't your words, but this is my interpretation, may better be described as the thousands of repetitions that happened before now. So I don't have to do those steps now. I did them in the past, therefore the term that I appreciate is the semantic network, or the network of related meaning.
Yeah.
So I observe something, I relate that to other things. It allows for some process to occur cognitively that can't be directly observed, but the output can be observed. Therefore, that's what we look at. And across time, it seems as though those become more accurate and less error prone in particular ways, but there's other forms of errors that experts will commit, right? So the thing to maybe sum it up better is just to simply say clinical reasoning is the output of a clinician.
Yeah.
For a complex web of reasons and that are not directly observable and not linear. So you did a wonderful job bringing many, many things in, which maybe explicitly I wasn't as aware of, but the concept of all the assumptions in all kinds of research design and the solution or the problem somebody's trying to solve. These are all things that are ubiquitous in scientific endeavor of all forms. That's why, say, the positivist view is there may be, and I'm cutting it off at the knees a little bit, but there may be a unique or singular reality that could be observed through appropriate experimentation, but the experimenter is always getting in the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So
I mean, you're close to opening the door to philosophy.
yes.
And
Well, I like that.
I'm not gonna like run through that because I feel sorry for your audience, but yes. I think, in writing an article, you want to be entertaining to the reader or you won't get published, right? Even though your article should be judged on the basis of science,
but it's not.
Storyline, the storyline has to make sense, and there still has to be like a denouement or whatever it is, like a plot to it that the reader can relate to. And in doing so, the author can only draw on their own philosophy of how the world works or what matters. But they don't explain that to the reader.
Correct.
They don't explain how there's 10 other philosophies that would have changed what they did. And because science is supposed to be written in this objective language, the story ends up being presented as if that's the only way that it could be seen. So it's not until you read across the same topic through the lens of different philosophies that you realize that, oh yeah, everything's true all at the same time. So that's why I'm going to close the door on philosophy for a second.
No worries. One of the things that the many of the people that I interact with and my students at my school become very aware of is one of the skills that I would say underpins any form of reasoning in a clinical or scientific realm is the philosophy of science, to understand some of those terms and how there are tells in information as to what philosophy may be utilized. So what epistemology and what ontology and the axiological choices, the value-based choices, you can spot them as a skill, but you have to have that predetermined, or not predetermined, but preformed concept that would relate to what other people might agree on about the terms epistemology, ontology, and axiology within science, because they're not the same as within philosophy writ large. They're more applied. The other deal being that the utility as a measurement term can be very useful. Did you have the time? Did you have the skills? Did you have the money? Did you have the resources? Right? Those do show up if you know what you're looking at, but I would call that a skill that is underpinned by those pieces of information. So when I'm reading something on osteopathy, I can see the value judgments. right? I can
Yeah.
see the epistemology. If there are certain terms that will turn you in a direction where you can understand it a little bit better, like you hear the term critical, right? And you're going to
Mhm.
start to think a little bit more, what I'm missing a word, constructivist.
Mhm.
Like you're gonna shift to that side, that type of ontology, right? When you see, say, a systematic review, you're going to think positivism with
Mhm.
very rigid constraints,
Yeah.
right? Like you're because the idea is if it can't be reproduced in the exact same way, then it is not the singular reality. Therefore, we must make choices to get to the singular reality that can be
Yeah.
reproduced, right? So there are terms whereby if you have that underpinning concept that you can start to work on it and then the output can be better understood. So it seems
Yeah.
like a meta of what you've already noted with clinical reasoning because it's a reasoning process. Clinical reasoning, would you accept if I made the statement that clinical reasoning can't truly be observed as separate from reasoning generally?
I would agree with that. Yes.
Okay.
The early scholarship on clinical reasoning started with how doctors think,
Mm-hmm.
which clearly sets them apart from everyone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not how humans think.
Clearly.
Yeah, it's how doctors think.
Yes.
It's not how osteopaths think.
Yeah.
It's how physicians
Mm-hmm.
or that we
Mm-hmm.
normally call doctors think. It's not how PhDs think. That's not what they mean with how doctors
Mm-hmm.
think.
Correct.
Um, and it very quickly got debunked that that was anything to do
Yep.
with them being doctors. It was just
Yep.
how we think. And
Mm-hmm.
by virtue of being in med school for 3 to 6 years, they
Yep.
have a bunch of knowledge that influences their thinking.
Yep.
So, thinking, reasoning, problem solving, decision
Mm-hmm.
making, to me,
Mm-hmm.
all of that is just easily, or I think easiest, defined as the output of what you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
what your
Yes.
brain has decided to store.
Yep.
And I'm not like, even then, I'm anthropomorphizing the brain as if it's like it is you, right?
Yep. Yes. 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 Yes.
So appreciating that, but the brain stores things without you intending and with you intending. So you could work
Mm-hmm.
really hard to memorize something, and that'll be in your memory. Or your brain is just picking up on things in your world, and thankfully it does. Otherwise, we would all be dead as a race. Like the
Yeah. Yeah.
human race
Well.
would not have picked up on, what normally kills us off, and then to
Yes.
avoid that. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
So the this allows me to sort of open the door to another concept that I think is the same concept and has gone through like what I would call a folk categorization. So there's a
Okay.
term that exists to describe thinking, right?
Mhm.
But it's somehow this unique form of thinking. So I consistently mess up the gentleman's name, his first name, anyways, but it's Dewey. I never
Okay.
remember if it's John or Thomas, right? I think it's John Dewey,
I think
the
it's John. I think
educational
it's John. Yeah.
reformer,
Yeah.
uh, posited the term critical thinking. And then it has become this term that is used in so many places to
Mhm.
describe what is considered a special form of thinking. And he apparently, so he defined it as a scientific frame of mind, I think that's more or less an appropriate paraphrase, like a scientific approach to the world or thinking. But then he abandoned the term pretty quickly. He just said, he
Okay.
sometimes said reflective thinking, and then other times he just started to say
Mm.
thinking. But the term stuck around,
Yes.
right? Such that it is continuously used as a term that people who may know less about cognitive processing, like the common refrain is, they don't teach critical thinking anymore. And I'm like, well, you never could, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's the same process, if I'm not mistaken. Would you agree that it's more or less the same process that that term shows up, it gets utilized in particular ways, it kind of becomes colloquial, and then it gets misapplied, and people keep chasing after the vapor?
I agree with that entirely. Can I
Sweet.
add some things to make it even more complicated?
Yes.
Okay. So critical thinking, yes, I did at one point myself track that term back to
Mhm.
Dewey,
Yep.
in its current form in sort of medical education.
Yeah.
There's
I
Donald
just
Shun, who talks
briefly,
about reflection.
I,
Oh,
I just briefly, I did the exact same thing. Even after I read your paper, did not code it at all. Like I read the paper that you did with Dr. Norman, and I
Yeah.
was Jonathan on that? Was Dr. Sherman on that?
Yeah, probably. I think
Yeah.
he's been on
So
most things. Yeah.
the I tracked that term back to Dewey, like having been your student, having read the paper multiple times, it did nothing to my brain. I knew what it said, it did nothing. I did the exact same thing. You've done more. Please excuse the interruption. Thank you.
Oh, no, 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 that's fine. But I mean, I feel like even that goes to show you, like, sometimes we don't appreciate something even as we read it. We have to experience it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
um, anyways, but thank you for that. Thank you for that note. I appreciate the compliment, I think is what that was.
Yes.
But it's dangerously close to making me forget where I was going. I had done what you had done at different times, I guess, and I was like, oh, it's Dewey's fault. And Donald Trump picked that up, and he told all the physicians they must reflect in action, and they must reflect on action in the past. And then people started to think, well, you can teach reflection, like we must all reflect, as if that there's a formula to how to reflect about a
Mm-hmm.
patient and what they need.
Mm-hmm.
But where I want to make it complicated is that I've also been talking to some critical theorists recently
Mm-hmm.
who would argue that the term critical thinking actually is more aligned with thinking,
Mm-hmm.
with the knowledge that a lot of society and a lot of what we experience in society is influenced by power structures.
Sure.
So, critical theory, I think, in its very, very simplified form, is about understanding where power lies and
Mm-hmm.
how that influences our decisions and what we do
Mm-hmm.
and our actions and who gets affected by who has the power and who suffers and
Mm-hmm.
all of that, who benefits. Um, and I think just knowing even how our government works and how funding for healthcare works
Yeah.
could help general public make decisions about their own healthcare or understand why things go wrong or,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, or understand why supposedly there's a family medicine or family physician shortage,
Shortage, yeah.
because that's not the entire truth. There isn't a family
Sure.
physician shortage. Actually, there's an overabundance of trained family medicine doctors. It's just that you can't find one as a
Okay.
patient because they're not practicing in a way that provides general family care, general
Okay.
family medicine care.
Okay.
The point I was trying to make is that critical thinking from a critical theorist's point of view has
Mm-hmm.
to do with pausing and checking assumptions in everything you've
Mm-hmm.
just heard
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
asking questions about, like you've done, and I think you said this before we pressed record, which is like, wait, are you sure? You sort of said like you just keep asking, like, okay, I know you've told
Yeah.
me, but again, go through it.
Yeah.
Because like
Yeah.
why, just
Yeah.
kind of asking that, but keeping in mind your knowledge of power structure. So you kind of have to know
Mm-hmm.
how decisions get made, how money gets distributed,
Yep.
why it helps certain people, that 1% of the world, to keep people in poverty. Like all of that is never
Mm-hmm.
going to change until the like capitalism, all of that stuff. You can
Sure.
get
Sure. Sure.
really, really deep in the weeds for
Yep.
that. But critical thinking has a place in that world
Mm-hmm.
where no one's arguing, no one's trying to imply anything about the way your brain works.
Mm-hmm.
What they're packaging together is the philosophy of like how power works in this
Sure.
world and how
Sure.
capitalism affects things. And then Dewey critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in the education space, when they use that term, it's as you introduced it.
Yeah.
And I would laugh and think like, oh, what does that mean? Just sort of gritting your
Yeah.
teeth and like thinking really hard about something till insight pops up.
Yeah.
But even insight in problem solving, that's a whole line of research,
Mm-hmm.
which makes me laugh because how can I possibly believe that I can train you to reproduce the insights I have?
Yeah.
But that is where that logic goes,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And it gets ridiculous when, again, if we use sort of everyday examples where you might have an insight about which highway to take because you
Hmm.
drive the same route and you know the traffic patterns and you just have an
Hmm.
insight about what to do at a certain moment. And I'd be like, oh my God, how'd you do that? That's amazing. You saved us like 30 minutes in driving.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would never know. Like, tell me how you solved that. It's like 15 years of driving in Burlington and like,
yeah.
that kind of
Well,
thing.
that's actually a really interesting thing because when I was living, like I still lived in North York, I knew what lane to be on particular highways at certain times of day. And when I would tell people that, they would say, "Oh," and then like everybody figured it out. I'm like, "No, it worked because nobody thought, and they didn't never figured it out." Like the amount of freedom that can be gained in particular lanes is very unfortunate and not how it's supposed to work. But it seems to be because the culture in Ontario has two things going on. Traditional Ontario drivers, for some reason, like the left lane.
Yeah.
My father commented on this after having moved from America many years ago. And the other thing that's really interesting, especially in the GTA, is there's people who learned how to drive in completely different cultures. So that you get a lot of culture mixing, maybe is a reasonable term, that people don't understand and everybody gets angry about. Like
Yeah.
I was informed by a woman. I can't remember what city. She grew up in a city in India. I don't remember the name of the city. Her mom lived 21 kilometers away, and it took her 2 hours to get there all the time.
Hmm.
Right? That's what she told me. I'm like, oh, you're not used to drive averaging 10 kilometers an hour, so
Yeah.
your experience of a road is just going to be different. And I should remember that. But
Yeah.
the to come back to the just the term critical or critical thinking, one of the things that I find interesting about critical theories, or really about any philosophical standpoint that begins investigation, is that
Hmm.
there is something a priori.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the challenge with anything a priori is the ability to detect when it's the appropriate lens,
Yeah.
right? So that's why I like what occurred to me in the HSCD program, whereby you provided the extra work, where I myself and Will had to define the terms around the
Hmm.
philosophy of science.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to identify that there are assumptions baked into all of it. And if I acknowledge those assumptions, it may be the most appropriate investigation or may be an inappropriate investigation for the question, right? The other thing with respect to like the question that I would have in most circumstances with something that would be considered a critical theory is, or not, maybe not question, maybe it makes me feel smart, but just the concept of do not attribute to malice what can be better explained through incompetence,
Yes.
right? And the with respect to decision making in a socialized healthcare system, a lot of it's incompetence,
Yes.
not malicious incompetence, just the people making
Yeah.
those decisions misunderstanding it.
Hmm.
The argument that I would make with, say, Ontario's healthcare system, as somebody who relates to it, not necessarily utilizes it much because I try to avoid it at all costs, but the how the funding is built is not visible to the patient who is suffering.
Yes.
It is visible to the physician and the nurse, and a large part of the funding does not go to the physician or the nurse. It goes to the vertical that administers the funding, right?
Yeah.
This is very rough, but my understanding is since the 90s, Ontario has not lost any square footage in hospital space, but
Okay.
it has lost about 50% of beds. And we've had a major increase in population since that time. So we were paying for fallow capacity. So hospital
Hmm.
were running like 50% bed capacity. Well, we're not going to spend for that because it is not smart
Yeah.
on the public purse. So, you get a politician who comes in and makes the argument like we can't spend money on stuff we're not using. So everybody gets really mad, which understandable in different perspectives. But the problem is they filled it up with like administrative hallways.
Yeah.
So there's healthcare is more expensive for at the same level of service for more people,
Yeah.
right? So it's like the same number essentially or ratio of frontline staff, but a lot more administrators. A good administrator will make everything better. A normal administrator makes everybody's day difficult. Right?
Yes.
These are my words. You don't have to agree with them. Don't no.
I I do. I do.
Okay.
I think when you said the physician or nurse, they
Mhm.
they can see how the money moves basically, or
Yeah.
they understand
Yeah. Yeah.
more about it. With time, I think the only thing I would add to that is with time. So the challenge there is that, a person deciding to get trained as a nurse or a medical student or physician,
Hmm.
so they're a nursing student or a medical student, are young enough to have that like optimism that they can change the system, but they don't know
Uh-huh.
how that infrastructure is run, right? So they kind of rail against the machine or
Yeah.
whatever metaphor you have,
Sure.
um, until they end up getting like buried by the weight of it. And
Hmm.
I find that with a lot of my colleagues who are kind of even more activist
Sure.
minded,
Sure.
right? So they would argue, no, it is malicious incompetence because they could just take the time to understand society. They could go into the communities. They could understand the
Hmm.
needs of different groups. And but I've seen every one of them as they get closer and closer to those leadership roles, they start they not crumbling. Crumbling is the wrong
Hmm.
word, but
Hmm.
they start behaving more and more like
Hmm.
the norm of the
Hmm.
leaders they were sort of
Yep.
critiquing themselves, because you just have to. There's too
Yep.
much of it for you
Yeah.
as one
Yep.
person to
Sure.
change. And so it's not like they give up their principles, but they start to appreciate why that incompetence is just, it's the easiest way to live, right?
Yes.
So you could
Correct.
be a very caring person, but if you start out as a politician without prior knowledge of
Mhm.
economy and
Mhm.
causes of suffering, and without prior knowledge of what it means to be a newcomer, to be
Yeah.
rich, to be poor, that you're not ever going to get, past those barriers, and you're going to make
Hmm.
decisions entirely based on your life experience,
Yeah.
which is by and
And
large very privileged for the way that we end up choosing politicians. So,
yeah. 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 Well, they win popularity contests.
yeah, well, they have
Voting.
to have money to do the
Yeah.
campaign, they have to have
Yep.
money
Yep.
to back them. So they have to
Yep.
have rich people backing them. So the whole
Hmm.
system, right? So once you get into it, then you're like, oh, you know what?
Yep.
I'm going to go off in my corner and be quiet and just
Yep.
start a farm.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that's I think what
Yeah. Yeah.
happens
Yeah.
to a lot of people in
Well,
their older age.
I think it's a reasonable analogy for the way that I approach, um, the way that I attempt to approach training my students is considering that if I try to tell them there's a solution to a named problem, I am
Mm-hmm.
doing them a disservice by disconnecting from the reality of clinical life of any form. Now, osteopathic clinical life is not high stakes. I would not call it that. It is not highly complicated. There's not a huge amount of responsibility or risk, right? Because the movements are relatively gentle and relatively slow.
Mm-hmm.
It's a schedule-based practice. People aren't walking in with true emergencies that should be in an emergency room. It's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
But if I provide them the framework of cervical side bending issue, whatever it is, so, next like this. If I say there's a solution for that, this is the move, then what I've done within their experience bank is told them there's an answer, just
Mm-hmm.
do it, and it will work. And then if they believe that, they will repeat that and continue to repeat it with the problem of detecting when it's not working or why it's not working. Right. So it's the easiest way to live, or the easiest way to educate maybe, is to provide people a specific repeatable step that solves the problem, and then have them repeat it, have them tested on it. So see if they can do the repeated steps, which means that it's valid because there's a reference it's pinned to. You can repeat it, you can observe it. There you go. But then if I make that their sort of direction, then I've pulled them away from the creative problem solving process, the output that will actually solve the problem the patient comes in with. So the way that I tend to teach is learn how to find something.
Mm-hmm.
Once you found it, learn a way to experiment through what you apply and observe how the person responds. When they begin to respond the way you want them to, or there's a dynamic there that's maybe incorrect, but the way that is going to be clinically relevant for them,
Yeah.
continue that until it no longer works or it's resolved, right? So the classic physician could be called, a bench scientist, right?
Mm.
They would see something, they would observe some pattern, they would call on previous memory, they would apply an intervention, likely at a low level, see if it's going the appropriate direction. If it is, maybe increase it. If it's not, you tried to avoid major harm, change directions.
Yeah.
Right? So that underlying process, I love the concept of FAR transfer now.
Mm.
Where before, when you were suggesting some directions, I was thinking about preparation for future learning, and I'm like, well, and when I heard Dr.
Mm.
Norman, I heard Jeff talk about it. He's like, yeah, they've been trying to put flesh on those bones for a very long time, and so now I just think I kind of meld everything into an expertise approach,
Yeah.
not like a master adaptive learner or an expertise. Like I'm like, nah, that one gives me problems too. It gives me the shakes.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. And there's problems with this one. But an expertise approach is training somebody to find, try, and adjust. And
Yes.
the output of that process will improve with respect to observed outcome in desired direction and accuracy across time with learning.
Yes.
Okay, so that's lots of
Yes.
words. Thank you.
Yes, I was trying to follow along there. Yeah. I
Yeah.
also had some thoughts in my head. I was trying to
Mhm.
keep still while listening. So yes.
Yeah. So like I've got what I call a heuristic-based framework, and I use the definition from a 1985 paper. I don't remember the authors, but essentially, algorithm is a set of steps that guarantees a solution, whereas a
Hmm.
heuristic is a set of steps that allows for the generation of solutions to experiment between.
Um, oh, okay. Okay, sure. I
It's
hadn't,
it's a it's a 1985 artificial intelligence paper. That's the
sure.
definition
Okay.
that they use. So
That
I'm like,
makes sense. Because,
I'll
yeah.
solidify that and work with it.
Yeah.
The but the what it allows me to sort of invoke is that in some of the work that you've done and that other people have done when looking at clinical reasoning, really the thing that seems to get dusted off when you're weeding through all the complexity is that the general approach is a hypothetical deductive approach,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
novices and experts use a hypothetical deductive approach, like
Yeah.
that's what they observably do.
Right.
Or maybe those phonemes strung together make enough sense that other people can sort of agree to it and work with it,
Yeah.
such that the hypothesis is generated and then the information is collected to confirm or deny, adjust as is needed,
Yep.
based on response to intervention, and experts just better because they've done it more.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, if
Yes.
you
What?
observe the
Yeah.
outcome, the output, it's better. Air quotes.
Yes. What's really interesting, and there aren't a lot of studies that did this, was to compare the hypotheses generated by novices with
Hmm.
those generated by experts, but then
Hmm.
also track time to answer
Yep.
and accuracy of all of that. And I think that um, a well-trained novice, such that they can generate the differential diagnosis, which just
Hmm.
means the cluster, like for your audience, the cluster of diagnoses that might all reasonably explain the cluster of symptoms
Hmm.
because, like, say for a physician, they've determined it has something to do with the lungs, right? So there may be
Hmm.
two or three things related to
Hmm.
certain symptoms, and that's kind of their differential. That's a very novice explanation of it. But I think experts and novices generate reasonable differential diagnoses,
Hmm.
but it comes down to experience to know how to efficiently do the deductive part
Hmm.
after that.
Hmm.
And so then experts are faster. But it also comes down to experience, such that I think, and this is a theory, that when they generate the differential, the expert already has sort of a weighting.
Okay.
So let's say there's three options. The expert
Yep.
might already be thinking, I think it's A, but you know
Hmm.
what? I'm going to have to investigate B and C.
Hmm.
Whereas not having had prior diagnostic or patient management
Hmm.
experience, therapeutic management experience. The med student or junior resident will generate something, but not really, they'll all be kind of equally weighted because they've just
Yep.
sort of been told the basics. They've been told
Yep.
like that heuristic. They haven't done
Mm-hmm.
the experimentation part
Mm-hmm.
themselves. Something that I've noticed though in my own work and in the patterns of more recent work of like colleagues, not necessarily collaborators,
Mm-hmm.
but who've done clinical reasoning research, is that the distinction between novice and expert has, actually, I don't know which direction to take this in, but it used to be that a medical student and a resident and even a senior resident qualified as a novice
Okay.
compared to a physician who'd been in
Mm-hmm.
practice at least 5 years or more.
Mm-hmm.
So that line where where the true novice is goes back. So I guess, yeah, the distance between novice and expert has
Uh-huh.
grown.
Okay.
So you genuinely have to be intermediate or a junior med student
Mm-hmm.
to start showing some of the same results they found when they first started doing experiments with,
Okay.
like looking when they first started doing research on clinical expertise and
Mm-hmm.
diagnostic expertise in particular. Why? I don't know. I mean, I can
Mm-hmm.
posit theories, access to information, the internet.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
People can read a lot more.
Yep.
They don't have to go to the library and sign things out.
Yeah.
There's just more higher acuity of patients. There's more patients. So, like med students
Yeah.
are being dragged in to provide services and care in a way they never would have before.
Yep.
But now, because there's just so much need,
Mm-hmm.
their responsibilities
Mm-hmm.
are elevated
Mm-hmm.
much faster.
Yeah.
So lots and lots and lots of reasons, but
Mm-hmm.
also med students come in a bit more knowledgeable, right? So in North
Yep.
America, the competitiveness of it, and actually they've changed the requirements. You typically need a bachelor's degree in a science.
Yep.
So I think from historically, the novice idea has even like changed, and I don't know that anyone's actually explicitly redefined
Okay.
a diagnostic novice compared to a
Mm-hmm.
diagnostic expert.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where we might see that pattern be maybe similar for as it was in diagnosis years ago is more that patient collaboration part,
Mm-hmm.
where you're going to see the junior resident still act like a novice
Mm-hmm.
compared to the physician who's been in practice
Yep.
but more, I think, when it comes to collaborating with peers, collaborating with other health care
Mm-hmm.
service providers, collaborating
Mm-hmm.
with the patient and their family, getting past language barriers, all of those
Yep.
kinds of things, I think might say that the novice is like just behind the expert, the way they used to
Mm-hmm.
measure them for
Mm-hmm.
diagnostic accuracy. And I hope that my explanation of that
Yeah.
makes sense, the way I was trying to.
Well, maybe to try to recapitulate, there's a variety of things which have maybe raised the floor of entry, right?
Yes.
The also one of like I make a general argument that with the availability of information that we have now, one of the evolutionary selection pressures that is probably occurring, it's not going to kill anybody, so it's not a proper evolutionary selection pressure, but success will be predicated by the ability to deal with information
Mm.
or interface it with it in a way that where you can utilize it and identify where it's useful and where it's not useful, right? All information, even when maybe incorrect, is going to have some level of utility. However, one of the challenges is your ability to get through it. So it's still a thinking and a reasoning process, and the output is the thing that we would measure as better reasoning, right? It's a skill that is identifiable by its output, measured against something. But the floor has raised, therefore maybe the reasoning skill of the novice is a little bit better. Maybe they've done a little bit more of that confirmatory and what's the proper term in the opposite? But you have your hypothesis, you accept that your hypothesis is correct based on the data, and you've tested it in a way whereby if it's correct, you can see it, and if it's incorrect, you can see it, and that's the falsifiability. So they're probably just more used to that implicitly, or maybe you could figure out a way to try to observe that. So the floor is higher, at least in what you can observe, because most of what you observe is the North American context, if I'm not mistaken, right? So other places, I don't know, maybe it's a different pattern. but I've never looked.
Well, North American, let's say global Northwestern. So this does
Sure.
include a lot of stuff that happens, a lot of research conducted in by European researchers
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
UK.
Okay.
Um, so so yeah, I think that,
Yeah.
like you said, the floor has
Yeah.
been raised.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe I don't know, as you were kind of reiterating, rephrasing what I had rambled on about, I kind of got an analogy in mind, which would like, so let me play with this if you can
Please.
humor me.
Okay.
Imagine sort of a child with an allergy to strawberries.
Okay.
So as a child, access to foods is limited in that someone, an adult, should ideally provide that to you, right? And
Hmm.
if they know you have an allergy, they're in charge of deciding what's in or out.
Hmm.
But I imagine, most likely, if it looks like a strawberry sitting on your plate, you're not touching it.
Uh-huh.
And when I say child, I mean like toddler with like
Yep.
solid foods
Yeah.
as a first introduction. And then as you start to be able to like move around and you can grab things off other people's plates, that's that understanding of what is a strawberry and what is like
Hmm.
say a cherry or a blueberry
Hmm.
starts to get defined. Those
Yep.
boundaries get defined, right?
Yep.
And so you might learn through trial and error, or people yell at you, or but you start to get a very clear idea of all the things that look like a strawberry,
Hmm.
and perhaps the different shapes they could take. They could be sliced
Hmm.
up. They could be in a sauce, right? So that you start to appreciate the color that strawberry sauce makes, or
Hmm.
looks like
Yep.
when or strawberries make when turned into a sauce. Okay,
Yep.
but as you grow up, food gets more and more complex. So
Yep.
like jam, right?
Yes.
Or a more complex sauce that might have
Hmm.
wine or wine reduction in it. So I'm starting to imagine that as you become an adult, your sensitivity through perception before you
Hmm.
even taste anything to detect maybe there's strawberry would include scent. You'd probably start
Hmm.
smelling
Hmm.
something close to
Hmm.
strawberry.
Yep.
On a menu, there may be a way that of describing things. Like maybe
Hmm.
they say mixed berries, and you're like, I'm not going to take a chance.
Yeah.
Or, maybe they say things that were foraged, and you're like,
Hmm.
wild strawberries could be foraged. I'm not going to take a chance.
Hmm.
And so as an adult, you're having to apply some more conscious analysis
Hmm.
before you decide this is safe for me.
Hmm.
And so I think if that may be a good analogy to, a med student has to learn anatomy.
Hmm.
And those are very factual things. There's a heart. Most
Yeah.
people have
There's
lungs.
yes.
There's the
There's
locations
a
of which are like 99.9% guaranteed.
well, heart and lung,
Humans,
yes. Other things,
the numbers of which, these organs and the way like homeostasis, the way that
Hmm.
blood circulates, all
Yeah.
of that is fact. So they
Hmm.
start off in a very, not even post-positivist, very positivist
Hmm.
training environment
Hmm.
where it's a hard line and it's
Yep.
closer to the adult is giving you some stuff, right?
Yep.
They're saying, here's what you need to digest, take it,
Sure.
and don't do anything with it. Just take it, like don't change
Yep.
it.
Hmm.
And then as you mature as a med student and become closer to residency, they're like, you got to go decide what you're going to die. You got to go make your own rules now.
Yeah.
And those things we said were facts, not always, because, we've got genetic like things and
Hmm.
like
Hmm. Hmm.
um, disabilities and people with surgeries. And
Yep.
then you're like, oh, damn. So you have to like almost start to forget things and you have to
Yeah.
start changing the rules that were very,
Yep.
very hard lined for
Yep.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing that society, especially people who like to see themselves as more liberal minded or more
Sure.
humanistic, one thing I
Sure.
think society is very reluctant to do is accept the fact that we all have different cognitive capacities for
Sure.
different aspects related to that developmental process of
Hmm.
like, what's a strawberry
Yeah. Yeah.
as life gets more and more complex.
Hmm.
And where I've seen the logic fall apart is that because people don't want to admit that, and it seems harsh to say some people are not as smart as others, whatever
Sure.
language, some people are not as flexible as others, some people's
Sure.
personality isn't as
Yep.
curious as others.
Yep.
Wherever the fault may lie, learners are going to progress in their development of expertise at a different pace
Yes.
and to a different, like they have a different upper ceiling
Limit.
as
Yeah.
well. So yes, the floor has risen in who gets accepted,
Mm-hmm.
but for those people, their ceiling is variable,
Yep.
for different topics and for different
Sure.
like skills and competencies.
Sure.
And we're so reluctant to acknowledge that,
Yeah.
that instead, I think educators and academics would rather pursue kind of a generic, how do we train you all to reach the same ceiling kind of model.
Yeah.
And along the way, we'll like revere the person whose ceiling is just so, so high and who
Uh-huh.
like, who
Excels.
met that ceiling at such a great
Yep.
speed.
Yep.
Suddenly we want to study how they did it and
Mm.
decide that based on that, we can because it must be a general formula if that's how you've decided to
No.
internalize it. If
Yep.
you see an outlier, this starts off, I think that again, this was before we pressed record, but you mentioned like the outlier can throw things off because we so want to believe that everyone can be trained to the same capacity. We don't
Mm-hmm.
want to believe that, we want to discriminate between like some people are just born really, really smart and efficient, that we want to try to like break down the outlier into generalizable
Yeah.
rules that we can
Yeah.
teach others.
Yeah.
And I think that master adaptive learner is a
Mm-hmm.
concept that comes from that, like, here's an outlier, someone
Yep.
who's fluid and fluent at
Mm-hmm.
learning
Mm-hmm.
and flexible at like, oh, they recognize they're wrong faster than other people. Um, that there must be a way to teach people to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think we can contribute to it, but I think a lot of it does come from the person themselves,
Yeah.
which you can't necessarily,
Yeah.
you can't always teach.
Yeah. Well,
I,
one of the
I would
things.
argue you can't ever teach.
Yeah.
So, but
So if it is very superficially evident that people are not the same as one another, right? Just like,
this is when it like it does sound ridiculous when you have to say it out loud. It's like, of course, people aren't
well,
the same as one another, but
yeah, then say the general envelope, the general capacity in any given direction is going to be variable, and that's, say, as a species, as a group, that's the beneficial thing, because under normal circumstances, the ones that cluster around the middle are going to be fine. It is the weird circumstances that happen all the time where the outlier, and you never know which one is the one that's going to do the thing that's going to be helpful. They're not helpful in any other situation, right?
that's the way to do it. Yeah.
In a quote unquote evolutionary biology concept, with all of its inherent assumptions and the values that it does and does
Mm-hmm.
not have. But if you, as an instructor of any form, maintain across time through experience the belief that everybody can hit the same ceiling, then you're not paying what I would call appropriate attention. I tend to prefer a floor approach. Set a
Yes.
floor, and those who excel above and beyond it, that's wonderful. But that floor
Yeah.
should be rigorous enough that the people are going to be beneficial in whatever they're providing or whatever they're doing. So it's like, set a good floor, a really, really hard to reach floor. And if you make it through that filtering mechanism, whatever it is, then you're probably in a good place. The variability in anatomy, like, I don't start my students off with this is anatomy. And I'm like, listen, I dare you to read multiple resources. I dare you. I provide them with resources
Okay.
and note that there's going to be variance. The other thing that I have to note often is that because I built the entire curriculum by myself and from scratch with no help, that there are errors, and they are definitely there, and I don't know where they are. And the reason I don't know where they are is because I made them, so I couldn't see them. So
Yeah.
then there's times when the tone of the email is very interesting to me. And I'm like, no, no, I told you I screwed up. I just don't know where. So tell me and I'll fix it. Like, I'll check it. I don't just immediately say, oh,
Yeah.
you're right. I
Right.
check it within some parameters. But I've developed this giant spreadsheet which has essentially all the skeletal muscles, their common blood flow, right? Their arterial blood
Mm-hmm.
flow, the
Okay.
nerve supply, the attachments, and the actions. And there is not agreement on those things. When you read different resources, it is different. Like,
Yeah.
it kind of clusters reasonably well, but when you actually look at the stuff and break your own brain the way that I did, then you're like, no. So I did that because people weren't believing me that the resources weren't the same. So I'm like, I'll just show you. And then
Yeah.
I did some basic stats, frequency stats on the side through the damn spreadsheet, so like people could see it. The like one variance, two variance, whatever it is. But the if I believe that if I start off with the floor that anatomy is anatomy, I'm not doing a proper service to my learners. I believe that if I start off with the floor, listen to me. Anatomy is a subject. It's a proper field that if you actually know what's going on, does not agree with itself consistently, and there's a lot of variation. You just don't learn it at the levels that you've gone through yet. Go talk to any surgeon you know, and they will tell you, I know what not to cut. And there is literally like basically visual art that they're trying to do. Like it's literally like a visual art, like painting with things that cut and sew.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's
It
like
is.
that that's
And it
happening.
is more of an art. I think of my colleagues, or well, really, if all the MDs, certainly that and it is MDs. I'm not, in this sense, it's appropriate for me to isolate like physicians and
Yep.
medicine from this,
Yep.
because amongst the MDs, it is the case that the ones I love collaborating with, and the ones that I think are really good educators, are very happy to acknowledge it's an art. There's
Yep.
a science behind it. But
Yes.
I think there's a science behind any art. Like you have to
Yep.
know how colors mix. There's a
Yep.
science to that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know how clay hardens. There's a
Yep.
science to that. You have to understand temperatures and moisture, all that. So that underpins, but
Mm-hmm.
it is an art.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so this idea that people take um, I don't know, art forms and try to turn it into an algorithm that can be taught to people
Mm-hmm.
because they write it in a scientifically objective language is just, oh, I just get sort of mad at that, right? Because
Yeah.
it, and then some of my colleagues, peers, educators, like they're just chasing their tail, looking
Yep.
for something that someone wrote in a, looking to like solve the problem or produce the
Mm-hmm.
formula that
Mm-hmm.
demonstrates some story that someone wrote very convincingly using
Mm-hmm.
scientific language, but really is about an art.
Yep.
The
Well,
end.
the one of the things that I do invoke is physicists
Mhm.
make a
Okay.
lot of assumptions. But when
Yeah.
the lay public is unaware of that, so they're trying to explain how the physical world works. Right? So I've heard these conversations, like you're well aware of the conversations that different physicians, different MDs will have about different specialties.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So like the one that I found the most interesting was I had a gastroenterologist talk to me about the orthopedic sweet spot. So
Okay.
orthopods will tend to put the stethoscope basically at the xiphoid process so they can listen to abdominal sounds, heart and lung sounds at the same time because this is what was
They
told to
can, I
me.
guess, differentiate between.
No, that's the rub, right? Like they would tell you that they can, but because you can get them all at the same time, right? So the gastroenterologist he's like, I don't know why we call orthopods doctors. They're carpenters.
Yeah.
Now, but this is the stuff that happens behind the scenes when you're not necessarily privy
Yes.
to it, you don't know, right? So I've heard this is physicists and mathematicians. Physicists, the classic joke, and I don't know if you've heard this or seen this, but within physics testing, it's like you have a cow. Assume the cow is a sphere.
Okay.
The basic concept being the math to describe a real cow, first of all, is variable and complicated. You need more terms to describe a cow. You need very few terms to describe a sphere. So if you get the sphere about the same volume and mass as a cow, you can get the approximation.
Okay.
And then the physicists will say the rest is for the mathematicians to figure out.
Right.
Have you ever heard of the Higgs boson?
Mhm.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
Higgs field, the theoretical physicists thought it was going to be like here, and then the experimentalists, right? They used to be the same thing, but now they're separated. The experimentalists thought it was going to be low. It was right in between them
Yeah.
when they
Right.
actually observed it. So the variability is the norm,
Hmm.
right? So I don't like to teach in any way from this particular sentence is the thing. I find this very frustrating on behalf of my students, not for me because it's normal for me, but I teach variability is the norm. Listen to me. If you can find something that is moving unequally compared to its paired structure, you have found the problem. Do you know exactly which tissue it is? No, but you know where it is. And then I can teach you a process whereby you experiment through inputs and read responses. Then you will know what suits this person. So I teach a hypothetical deductive approach the whole way through, because not only does it seem, especially supported through our conversation, that the hypothetical deductive approach is the approach to medicine that everybody uses, whether they can tell you or not. So it's maybe the bedrock construct of clinical reasoning.
Yeah.
The hypothetical deductive method, which can be taught, the details can't. Right?
Yes.
The approach, so it's a forward transfer paradigm. It is something that is omnipresent, but cannot be touched or seen or heard. It's always there, but it's abstract.
Yep.
Right? So it's a framework. And then, so I teach that the whole way through so that the variability is something that my learners are constantly engaged with, as opposed to, I'm going to teach you about the shoulder. I'm like, why don't you go look at the shoulder that's in front of you and find out what it's doing in a way that makes as few assumptions as possible? Right? So I'm like, just the principle of parsimony, make as few assumptions as possible. Can you tell me which one is moving worse than the other one? And they can. And then I say, can you tell me where it's got the most resistance to pressure? So if you squish a soft tissue, it should squish. And if it doesn't, you can identify where that is. And usually they can pretty quickly. And I'm like, now you know where to go, but you don't know what to do. Well, I'm going to teach you how to figure out what to do, as opposed to tell you beforehand a priori what to do. So the approach that I developed, which partially is by accident, not explicit in relation to a lot of the stuff we talked about, but definitely underpinned by what I learned in the HSED program, is that you teach the approach as opposed to the answer. There was a talk a little while ago. There was a woman from the American Medical Association, and I do not remember her name, but she was talking about the AI initiatives that they're funding. What they're trying to do is figure out where they break. Right. Okay. So they're actually funding people to try to build AI stuff for teaching, for actually checking clinical reasoning. So like ambient AI, is this hypothesis generating discussion? Okay. Is one of the ones. And it's up on the Merit YouTube. I just don't remember the woman's name. It was a great talk. But one of the things that the AMA is doing is saying we have to acknowledge we cannot teach the details that will predict medical practice. We just can't teach them. There's no way. We need to teach you how to figure it out as you go. Yeah. So, to feel really smart about myself, I'm like, I need to teach you how to figure it out, because I can't tell you ahead of time what to do. Right. Yeah. So to try to bring it all together, to maybe make some quick statements. Clinical reasoning is not a clean concept that doesn't dissolve into other things. That's fair? Yes. Okay. So because it is not a clean concept, it is not something that can be directly observed or taught. Yes. Okay.
And the directly observed part is because you can't actually see, neither can the person whose reasonings detect where in the brain a process is happening, what associations are being brought forth. And so as an outsider, you can't see through their brain into their neurons. And as an insider, you don't know what's happening at the subconscious level.
Yeah. Well, the base understanding that I have is that the vast majority of even cognitive processing is prediction based on prior experience, especially related to close exemplars. Yeah. Right. So
if I may,
please, no.
If I may extend your the way that you teach through hypothetical deductive approaches, it's what everyone does in their life. Yes. So like this should be something like the language has made it so clinical, has raised it to a level of like, oh, the doctors do these things. But when you think about it, we all have a theory of how, say, life works.
Uh-huh.
Well, let's simplify that even further. We all have a theory of how our life works. Like we
Yep.
wake up at a certain time, our house is organized in a certain way, the floor is
Mhm.
going to be there when I get out of bed. Like those are theories, technically.
Yeah.
So you could argue that you wake up with a set of hypotheses
Hmm.
that everything's going to function and happen
Hmm.
the way it did yesterday.
Hmm.
And those are based on your knowledge of relationships. The floor's
Hmm.
not just going to disappear
Hmm.
because of physics, like,
Hmm.
because of the physics in our world.
Sure.
So it'll be there.
Yep.
We extrapolate from that when we're driving. We may not be
Yep.
able to see the actual road around a hairpin turn,
Hmm.
but hypothetically,
There's a road.
based on physics, and if you've taken this road before, especially, there's no
Hmm.
reason it shouldn't be there unless there was
Hmm.
some event that you heard on the news. Um, so we create, and this bothers me, so I will just get into the weeds for this a little bit, is people confuse hypothesis with prediction.
Uh-huh.
So I predict the floor will be there, sure. I
Hmm.
hypothesize that everything that was there before will be there before, which extends to the floor
Yep.
because my world is stable. Like, so my
Yep.
hypothesis is that I live in on Earth
Uh-huh.
in
Yep.
that follows certain rules of physics.
Hmm.
The hypothesis part is the general part. So it
Yep.
sounds like you teach your students from the level of the hypothesis of how joints and muscles and
Yep.
tissues relate to each other, how soft tissue should feel and
Hmm.
what should happen. And so, oh, if tissue is soft, then putting pressure on it should do something.
Hmm.
It's not
Hmm.
necessarily directional,
Hmm.
but there's a way that that becomes a hypothesis that hinges entirely on your understanding of tissue
Hmm.
structure.
Hmm.
And then the deductive part is the experimentation.
Yep.
So I hope what I said feels like I'm validating and like
Yeah.
actually reiterating what you said
Yeah, for
before, which
sure.
is the physician, yes, must engage in experimentation.
Yes.
Um, and patients or the norms in society are such that we have internalized this expectation that physicians must just are problem solvers. We go in with our problem, they'll solve it, and
Yeah.
we go
Yeah.
home
Well,
and problem solved.
the thing that I see as the challenge is that the physician should be an experimental physician, like not like, that's a weird
Yeah,
way
I
to
know.
say it.
Like in the
That'll get
yeah.
misconstrued, but um, the hypothetical deductive approach is the appropriate approach because we must acknowledge, or we not must, but it benefits us to acknowledge that the substrate that we were working on is similar enough that we can have a prediction, but different enough that we have to pay attention
Yeah.
because people are different. What regulation in some ways has done has really disincentivized the experimentation process.
Okay.
It's very much gone more towards best practice guidelines, clinical guidelines, which have major flaws that the people that like to build them are not happy acknowledging, as far as I can tell. I'm sure you've read some. I have read some. I feel like they are written by people who love to tell other people what to do and think you're dumb. Like
Yeah.
there's like that's what I can gather.
Yeah.
Now, that is based on my previous experiences and my view of the world, not anybody else's. But and there's the societal and
Actually,
cultural
may
pressure.
I
Please,
think I would modify that.
sure.
I think I think the people that write them have the best intentions,
Yes,
and
yeah.
they believe what they're doing is providing support to someone in a moment where there's complete uncertainty and
Hmm.
there's absolutely no means to decide what the next step is.
Sure.
The people who believe in those guidelines
Okay.
as truth, as like the Ten Commandments, as like as the law, are it's not that they necessarily think that you're stupid, it's that they like their world very simple.
Sure. That I
So
appreciate.
they think everyone should follow those because they
Yes.
follow those.
Yeah.
And then they get annoyed that other people don't
Hmm.
stick to all the same rules. And then
Yes.
they decide that that's the reason we have such high rates of diagnostic error and so many
Yeah.
other things. But,
I had an experience whereby I had a conversation with somebody who took umbrage at the things that I said about evidence-based medicine, where I said it was basically copying other people's homework. Like I have a strong vocabulary, but I also have a dirty mouth.
Yeah.
So it took a long time because there was some stuff in the conversation that I ended up having with this individual that was showing me something else. I'm like, something is not adding up. There's something else happening here. One of the things that I kept hearing was, or not kept hearing, but I've seen this individual say over time, is that you can't possibly expect medical professionals to read all the literature and stay up on it.
Okay.
And my response is, well, you can. They may not do it, but you can expect it of them because they're professionals. The addendum to that was that systematic reviews synthesize all the information and tell you that you can trust it. And I'm like, no,
Mm.
it doesn't do that because there are assumptions built into the process. You are rejecting a bunch of
Mm.
things that might be germane to the situation. And so it's like, okay, well, this is really useful because you can't expect them to read it all. And it synthesizes it and gives you trust intervals, right? Or confidence intervals, more or less. And I'm like, yeah, but it usually can't do that because the methods of collection are so different. You can't even do the math on it. So no, right? It just like there's all kinds of problems with it. It doesn't mean it has no value, but it means that those problems are, it benefits us to acknowledge them. And then what I
Yeah.
found out after the conversation, because there was parts of the conversation where what I could tell was that the comprehension of what I had expressed wasn't connecting. It's like something's missing here. Like you're not hearing what I'm saying. You're characterizing what I'm saying, and it has absolutely no relation to what I said. I found out later that the individual does have, it will express the presence of learning disabilities,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And that they like to utilize a variety of tools to help their cognition and
Okay.
kind of organize it and bring it together. And I was like, okay, well, because the ADHD is present and like high lapses in attention, therefore I'm like, oh, that's why. It's not that you're incapable of comprehending what I'm saying. You didn't observe what I was saying because of your attention lapses.
Okay.
So it allowed me to soften it in a variety of ways. I was like, oh,
Mm.
it would have been nice to know that before because the manner in which I perceived aggression towards what I was saying
Mm. Yeah.
and personal hurt
Yeah.
that I had said something that could be deemed negative about systematic reviews and EBM. I was like, oh, oh, this is good for you.
Yeah.
That's great, but it's not good for everybody. And I do
Yeah.
expect the people who can to keep up. The people who maybe have a different skill set utilize different tools. Just tell me you're using them,
Yeah.
right? Because the skill set of somebody else it is going to benefit me at some point. But if it's the impression was aggression, but I think they took what I said as aggressive, which I understand, like, but I meant it.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, the okay to try to come back because
Yes.
as you have noted, we are part of the Shiny Object Club. Hypothetical deductive method, most appropriate, maybe description of the actual thing that's occurring. It is
Yep.
a ubiquitous thing throughout not only healthcare but life.
Yep.
The ability to generate the hypothesis and uh, test between things to identify the most appropriate strategy is maybe the sign of increasing expertise because when you look at the output, which is maybe the best place to apply clinical reasoning as a term, is increased with better skill and experience of utilizing the hypothetical deductive method, whether you know you're doing it or not.
Yes.
Okay. So I still feel smart.
I always knew you were. May I add something for your audience?
Please.
Because at least in the medical education side of things, people take umbrage with using diagnosis as an indicator of expertise, like
Okay.
just the accuracy of the diagnosis. And
Sure.
certainly diagnosis um, is key in your line of work, but I don't
Mhm.
know if it has that same like status
No, it's also
compared to
the
everything
legality
else.
within Canada because we're
Okay.
like massage therapists aren't allowed to diagnose osteopathic manual
Right.
practitioners,
Yeah.
unregulated through most of Canada. The legal ability to use that term in the way that would cross over with medicine is not there.
Yeah, but I've had lots of clinicians explain to me that there's a diagnostic component to your scope of practice because there's a
Sure.
bit of like I have to define this problem in a way
Yep.
that narrows down like the target
Hmm.
for where therapy can be applied. So
Hmm.
that makes sense to me. So diagnosis happens, but physicians have just turned it into this God term, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But where I want to and so the studies that I've done show that the accuracy of a diagnosis does correlate with a lot of other things, and so it's a
Hmm.
good indicator of other aspects of clinical reasoning expertise.
Hmm.
What I suspect is happening, though, especially in like as society evolves, is that the deductive part of it.
Hmm.
Um, like whereas before it was always how does the doctor think, so just what's happening
Yep.
in their mind,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it stayed that way. I think it's still that way, really, for
Sure.
for decades.
Hmm.
I think where and people say, oh, it should be patient centered. I think rather than teaching people to be adaptive, it may be that the deductive component of it is where the patient's involved.
Hmm.
So, like, what are the experiments we're going to conduct to
Yep.
determine which,
Yep.
like, how, whether the hypothesis I have is correct or not should involve the patient.
Yes.
And when an
Well, it kind of has to.
experimentalist, or, well, it has to, but I don't, and I think that is a skill,
Yeah. Yeah.
perhaps,
Yes. Yes.
or a
Yes. Yes.
talent, or a, I don't
Yep.
know, yeah, ability that is
Yep.
variable that can
Hmm.
affect what the patient experiences as the diagnosis and the
Hmm.
outcome of treatment.
Hmm.
But I don't know that physicians are taught how to do that. How do you
Sure.
deduce? How do you
Yeah.
conduct deductive reasoning with a
Yep.
partner?
Hmm.
And how do you do that when the partner may not agree in the outcome
Yep.
that you intend? So, like an
Yep.
experimentalist is like, well, I mean, for those who know like the scientific method, there's the null hypothesis, which is everything's the same no matter what I do, like everything's the
Yep.
same. And then the other hypotheses will be like if I do something, we'll get something different.
Yep.
If I
Yeah.
don't do something, we'll get something different. And so when you're deducting something by yourself, your hypothesis about what's wrong with this patient is like, okay, fine. So the null hypothesis is that, well, that's not what's wrong. And so really, if I throw a treatment at this, nothing should
Hmm.
happen.
Yep.
But if I throw a treatment at it, well, and if that hypothesis is correct, and that's where the relationship that leads to these symptoms is,
Hmm.
then this treatment should work.
Hmm.
But the outcome of the treatment working
Yep.
may not be what the patient wants,
Yes. Yes.
right? And so to them, it's like, I don't want that treatment. There's no point in that treatment because
Yeah.
that's not the outcome
Yep.
I care about.
Yep.
And it, on as a vague concept, it might seem like why wouldn't a patient want the same outcome that the physician wants? But where
Different
this
values.
came up as like a concrete example, and this is probably so obvious to you as an osteopath, but working with a physiotherapist recently,
Hmm.
the concrete example is the person who's like, I don't, and I don't imagine I could ever become as fit as like to be able to go jogging every morning for 5 minutes even.
Hmm.
I want to be able to stand and bear my own weight
Hmm.
and hold the arm of my daughter as I walk her down the aisle in her wedding. Like
Hmm.
that's a very different fitness goal
Yes.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
mobility goal, right?
Yep.
And they're
Yep.
like,
Yep. Yep.
after that, I'll sit in the wheelchair. Like to them, it's like they need a very
Yeah.
focused moment of mobility and independence.
Yep.
And the if the physio is not trained correctly, they might be like, "Oh, we need to get you back to your athletic days." And they're like, "No,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
peace."
Yeah.
So sorry, I'll stop
No. No. It's
lecturing at
okay.
that point.
So the one of the things that I am very explicit about is the difference between a sign and a symptom. A sign is what the everybody can identify or observe, including the patient. The symptom is what only the patient can observe and report. So a runny nose is a sign, not a symptom, right? So that's a meaningful difference.
Yeah.
The osteopathic world can work on signs. You can observe signs.
Hmm.
I cannot observe the internal state of sensation of the patient except by proxy. And usually when they report it, they're reporting accurately and honestly because it benefits them.
Yeah.
But like I joke and I say, I can't feel your pain. If I could feel your pain, I can't feel your feelings because if I did, I would be having too many feelings. Like I'd be feeling too many feelings. So I indicate to my learners, you will work on sign
Yeah.
You will have to make assumptions about things, but they'll probably be reasonable because you're not naming things that you can't observe. Like you
Yeah.
don't know it was this tissue, this ligament, this fascia. You got a really good idea in certain areas, but other areas are so complicated that you're gonna be in the right spot, but maybe not have the right term.
Yeah.
So epistemologically, it's too much of an assumption
Okay.
because it can't be known. But I also clinically tell patients, I'm like, listen, there's your scale and there's my scale. Your scale is always more important than mine because it's the one that matters to you. My scale is how you move. Usually, how you move and what you're feeling are related well enough that when one changes, the other changes in some degree. But I also tell people I aim to treat you as little as possible because if it's working, you should be able to see me less. And if it's not working, you should see me less. It's not, it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So the acknowledgement of that there are a minimum of two individuals involved in the process, the acknowledgement for my learners that what they're trying to do is identify the input that has the response in the desired direction for the person that they're working with, and they can follow that. And then when it's a proper match, both scales improve. So the scale of movement that I can observe and the scale of sensation that the person can observe more directly, as well as if it's in the direction of their goal, right? So
Okay.
it is a co-constructed thing, whether we want to talk about it that way or not. All healthcare is co-constructed. It is patient-centered
Yeah.
until you, as the person utilizing your skills in their direction, uses your ideology to override, right? So osteopathy as a profession, because it has what's called the barrier concept, which I describe as don't make them say ouch,
Okay.
right? So they
Yeah.
get more of the goal without them protecting themselves. If they
Yeah.
protect themselves, you can now predict that they're more likely to be sore or it's less likely to work, right?
Yeah.
So if I generate soreness in somebody because of my intervention, well, their pain levels here when they walk in, it goes to here when they leave, and then it drops and they feel better from here, but do they feel
Yeah.
better than there, right? So
Right.
a lower introduction of sensation allows maybe more sensitivity to change uh, from starting point.
Mhm.
So I have to acknowledge that I'm not targeting their feelings, no matter what I say. Like I can say this will help your pain, but
Mm.
I can't know that. So
Yeah.
epistemologically, there's a problem. So that's where I work from as a clinician, as an instructor. I say, listen, you can't feel their feelings, but you can find what's not functioning in your environment of observation, and when they relate properly, they change together. And it's
Mm.
highly variable. So you have your hypothesis is that there is a mechanical relationship between health and disease states. So whatever you can mechanically find should relate to their health and disease state. And if you change what you can find and it properly relates, the health and disease state will change in some degree. So the
Okay.
hypothesis is constant, and the method of identifying it is can you find where it doesn't move? The method of intervening is can you figure out what they do not protect themselves from?
Yeah.
And then do they move better? So you've got your side taken care of and the other side. So the gentleman,
Mm.
he said he didn't say he was the founder, he said he was the discoverer of osteopathy. My battery died. Can you hear me now? Okay, cool. I'll move this out of the way.
Yep.
It's going to be a little bit funny. That should be better. Okay. So I had a technical failure, but the camera won't be as nice because oh darn it, got to move this thing. There we go. So anyways, yeah, the general thing that I was pointing to was the hypothesis generation process, the involvement of the patient, and all of that comes together to underpin the teaching approach, which thank you for the discussion thus far because it's very validating, whether it should be or not, whether I'm right or not, but it's very validating.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it is for me too. And maybe you didn't expect that, but
no, I did.
it helps to talk through something, especially when the something is what you have read about and have tried to translate for your own work, but then to talk about it and it makes sense, right?
Mhm.
So you've dived into literature and tried to take it apart so that you could build your curriculum.
Yep.
And I think to hear what is working, I'm assuming this is working for you and your students and that
As
they
far as I can tell,
learn.
they're very frustrated initially because I use a discovery followed by guided learning
Sure.
approach. They're
Yeah.
very frustrated to start because
Yeah.
I make the ones who have not done it before do it within constraints. So I tell them, this is your
Okay.
goal, this is what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Give it a go. And they're like, but I don't know what to do. And I'm like, yeah, you got to get used to that part.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
if you can figure it out from scratch on the fly, and that's the primary skill that I
Mm,
teach, then in the future, when it gets a little bit different, you can continue to do the same thing.
right.
Right. So I start you
Yeah.
off confronting the scary uncertainty, which they don't like.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then by the time they go through the second round and the third round, and I'm like, was I correct? And they're like, yeah, you're right. So
Yes.
it's working as far as I can tell. They do have feelings about it, which
That's
I
excellent.
acknowledge, and I say I can't change them, but I do acknowledge that you're having these feelings, and I
Yeah.
engineered for them on purpose.
That, yeah, just to say that it's like I know it's going to happen, and then
Yeah.
that does help. Like even with patients, certainly, like it helps to be like,
Mhm.
I may not be correct,
Yeah.
and like you're driving this as much as I am, sort of thing. But
Yeah. Well, and this
yeah.
is the thing. Like I try to teach the in a way that does not allow for my learners to put their ideology above the patient.
Mm, okay.
Because I'm trying to say you have to respond to how they respond.
Right.
So if they're responding in the direction that is not ideal clinically, you do not do that, right? Classically, the medical practitioner would more or less be that way or expected to be that way, whereas sometimes you get best practice guidelines and they'll lose their license if they don't do it the ideologically prescribed way.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a challenge, but
Yeah.
the it is patient response before preferred approach
Yeah.
in how I've built everything that I'm doing. The process to get from not being a professional to being a professional that does that has challenges, but they're predictable enough that they seem like I can deal with them.
Mm, okay.
So, and
Yeah.
my learners can, even if they don't tell me how grumpy they are about it, and it's okay. Like I do tell them, like, I know that you're going to be grumpy about this. That's fine. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, and if they acknowledge that, yeah, you were right, that is a wonderful reward, I think, at the end of it.
Yeah, yeah, but then you have to listen to all the words between the start and the finish.
Uh,
So
just start recording them and play it to future students.
yeah, yeah, that's possible. I can do some of that. Um, so I think we've covered all of the ground that I wanted to cover and had some nice tangents, which I'm well known for. So I want to thank you for your time. I'm going to stop the recording and I'll say a proper goodbye off the recording. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.